Welcome to the Man from Edom. This is episode 9 of the YAHOWAH blog, and I am Craig Winn, your host, and co-host here is our internet sensation. This is Wookie. We're not keeping you up, are we, Wookie? Okay. This is a complicated story, a challenging presentation, because it actually runs so deep. God has some 20 different descriptive titles and names that he uses to describe this man from Edom. He introduces us to him initially using the term choter, which is either a rod of divine judgment or it is a stem that gives life to the fallen stump that has been Israel. And from that point, which our first introduction to the choter was not actually the first mention of the choter, but our introduction to him took place almost 10 years ago. And came upon it because I was covering the first 20 some odd chapters of Yeshaya, Isaiah, from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And here it is in the 11th chapter, and it is the singular theme of the 11th chapter of Yeshaya is about the choter. And the whole presentation is interesting because the first 10 chapters of Yeshaya are about God's frustration with his people's propensity to be religious. And God hates religion. So all of them, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, even politics, particularly collective politics where governments become large and intrusive. And towards the end of the 10th chapter, God begins to point at his resolution for this, how he will go about encouraging his people in the end to eschew religion, to walk away from it, to engage with him in a relationship as opposed to being religious in their relationship with one another. I'm going to give my wife the keyboard because, well, Wookie does have a propensity to walk on keyboards, and we don't want him to do that. So God's remedy for his people's tendency to be religious, to be political, was to speak to them through this choter who would write a nesh sign for his people to see. And then after having done so, and you can see the sign behind me, there's 35 books here that are all posted free for you to read at in their entirety at yadayah.com. And then God asked me to speak directly to you for the purpose of doing as the choter is designed, which is to reintroduce Yehudim and Israelites to Yahweh's name, a name that you erased from his testimony in your lives thousands of years ago, and to reacquaint you with his beloved Son and our Messiah, the returning King, David, because he's the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim so that you might live. And there are 2 upcoming harvests, which I'm tasked with the responsibility of coordinating. They are Shabua and Towrah. And so this is when the concept of God choosing someone to awaken his people in the last days became initially apparent to me and to the community that has grown as a result of it, the covenant family. But this is just the beginning of it, because you see, choter was one of at least a score of highly descriptive titles that Yahweh chose to apply to this individual named Yada, who would be a Bashar, a corporeal herald for his beloved son, Yahweh's Kol voice at this time. He would be the final of the three Zeroah, the one cultivating the seeds for a productive harvest. He is a Nakar and Nakri, which is an observant foreigner. And he is the Adama Parah, the man whose corporeal body as a bull is offered to save the remnant of Yisrael on Towrah. He is this man from Edom, and it's a Ze Bo Men Edom, a man coming out of Edom, that the great prophet in the 63rd verse, which we covered some time ago, said would save a great number of Israelites. So this is that story of that individual that God has chosen, and he isn't normal. No, there's a lot of people would claim over the years that I'm abnormal, and I represent that statement. But in this case, he is the extreme of not normal. And that's really good when it comes to Yahweh. God does not want us to be normal. He wants us to be special. But as it relates to this Choder, who is the man from Edom, he is particularly unique. And he's the only person in human history that has been given Yahweh's 7 Ruach. The beginning with the Ruach of Yahweh, and continue with the Ruach of Chakma, which is wisdom, the ability to be intelligent and to deduce insights. He is given the unique spirit of Bien, which is knowing how to find the common denominator, to use statistic analysis for probability, to make the connections between the various things that Yahweh has revealed through the prophets, so that he would be the first, and he's given the spirit of the entire story. The ability to share God's message from beginning to end, so that we know that we began in Eden and understand precisely what took place there, which is why we had a multi-part series on In the Garden, and how we are going to be brought back into that garden, which is what Sukkah represents. And this individual has been given the spirit of great knowledge, as well as the spirit of great respect for Yahweh. And perhaps most of all, he is given the same spirit that Dode was given, that made Dode so much an example for us to emulate, respect, and follow. And that is the spirit of Gibor. And this is the spirit of boldness, of courage, of confidence, the spirit of capability to get the job done. And while Dode David was clearly God's most Gibor, courageous and competent man, from God's perspective, I'm not far behind. And this is particularly important because one needs to be bold, noting that there are very few people who are willing to embrace the truth. And those who are willing to continue the lies of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, as well as progressive platitudes, are many. And their voices are shrill. And they control the platforms that we have available to communicate with you and throttle this message. So we're up against a mighty horde of individuals who have a vested interest in you not knowing the truth, and relatively few that want you to know it. So as we were continuing this process of coming to realize how many prophecies there are regarding this role, and um, there are hundreds upon hundreds of them. And I struggle with this a bit for two reasons. One is that God's people are already shell-shocked, if you will, by people who have come to them and saying they have a special standing with God. Now, no one has done it as I have done it, not even close. And so it's a little uncomfortable saying, yeah, I'm that guy. But God has not provided any option but to acknowledge that I am. When I engaged with him, well, now it's been 24 years ago. It was on Towrah, Yom Towrah, the day of the herald, not so coincidentally, in 2001, a week or so after 9/11 transpired in the United States. I did not at that time even know Yahweh's name. And I had no idea of this journey that we would be on, that it would lead to this place. And I began as anonymously as was possible. I chose the pen name Yada, not knowing that it would be the name that Yahweh himself had chosen for me. And we began this process that would require, well, really every waking hour for 24 years. Well over 100,000 hours have been invested in this. And the reason I say that no one has done this similarly. So if you are a Jew that has their defenses up, the moment that a goy comes to you and speaks to you about God, the moment someone says that they have a special endorsement from God, I'm here to tell you that there is a considerable difference. And that difference is these hundreds upon hundreds of prophecies. And that is why we're doing this program, first on the Choder, then the man from Edom. And at this point, I was actually postponing re-engaging in this series because the man from Edom is not sufficiently comprehensive to describe the unique calling and the prophecies pertaining to this mission. And nor was Choder. It's just the beginning. And yet, if I shared them all with you at one time, the title of this program would be like writing a book, because God threw the book at it. Now, I told you that there are a lot of things that are different. One is that I am anti-religious, as is God. So I'm not claiming a religious title. Most who have falsely come at you have come claiming to be a Messiah, and I most certainly am not. Although I know who he is, and he is not who the world thinks or believes. You see, the real Messiah, the actual Son of God, the Savior, knowing who he is the single greatest discovery, easily of the last 3,000 years and perhaps in all time. And that is that the Messiah and Son of God, the returning King, the Savior who opened life's door, perfected us, and signed our adoption papers into the covenant family, as did David. So I do not claim to be the Messiah, but I claim to represent him and to know him and to serve him. I do not claim, as so many have in the past, to be divine, but I have the seven spirits of Yahowah operating within me, and I am very close to the Son of God. He has written extensively about what I'm doing for him, and for you. The other differences are that I can cite and have and will continue to cite many hundreds of specific prophecies regarding this role, such as the Choder, the man from Edom, the final Zeroah, Yada, the Adam of Perah, this man from Edom, the Nakar, for which there are no other candidates. We are just 13 months away from the fulfillment of the first obligation of the final Zeroah, that is the Shabuah harvest. And the very fact is that I stand alone as one with the qualifications to coordinate this end gathering. We are just 8 years away from the Messiah's return with Yahowah on Yom Kippurim. And I'm the first and only person to know when that's going to occur, right to the minute. And so, not only have I, and will I continue to cite, and there will be so many more as part of this series, prophetic proof that God chose me to serve you in this way. Understand that I'm not seeking a following. I want you to follow Dode, our Messiah and King. I'm not seeking acclaim. I would prefer to have been anonymous. It's just that Yahweh would prefer that I be known by the titles that he has chosen for me. But I want you to acclaim Yahweh. I do not claim even to be a prophet. Yahweh made that clear that it would be counterproductive at this time to have another prophet. That instead, he wanted someone who would understand the prophets for the first time and share their message with you in a way that would resonate with you, that you would be able to understand them for the first time in almost 3,000 years. I am unique in that I want nothing for myself other than the knowledge, the satisfaction that I've done this job that Yahweh has asked me to do as well as I'm capable of doing it. Which is why at 70 years of age, I work 90 hours a week, helping you to become aware of the name of your God, the name of your Savior, and specifically what God's offering and asking in return. And here to tell you precisely when everything that matters between now and the time that God returns will occur. And there's a lot of news, a lot of future history for you to process. And in this regard, over the past 23 years, I have laid out many, many hundreds of detailed predictions. Now, God doesn't predict in his prophecy. He's revealing future history. I'm a student of the prophets, and I'm inspired with Yahweh's 7 Ruach. And so I'm in a position to foretell what's going to occur. And even though I do not claim the status of a prophet, I am a messenger. I am a witness to more of my titles. I've never been wrong. And I'm doing many things that are very precise. Like, for example, I'm telling you exactly when the Shabuah harvest is going to occur. May 22nd, 2026, 7 years before Yahweh returns. I'm telling you exactly when the Towrah ingathering will occur. The 23rd and 24th of September, 2033. I'm telling you exactly what's going to transpire on both of those two ingatherings. I will give you to the very minute when Yom Kippur will be fulfilled in year 6,000 Yah with Dod's return, as brilliant as the sun in Yahweh's presence. 6:22 p.m. as the sun sets in Jerusalem, October 2nd, 2033, which is year 6,000 Yah. Yom Kippurim. I can tell you exactly what's going to happen on Sukkah 5 days later, when the earth is transformed into conditions experienced at the Garden of Eden. I can tell you when the two-state solution is going to be imposed on Israel and why it's going to occur. And I can share with you the consequence of it. And just as I predicted the events of October 7th, 2023, 2 years in advance of that attack, I am also foretelling the next Islamic assault on Israel and when it will occur and how large it will be and why it will transpire that way and what the consequence is going to be. So I have a lot to share with you, Israel. I'm also unique in that no one in all of human history has done what I have done in goddamn religion. 5 volumes that set the Quran into the context of Muhammad's life, reorder it chronologically, and use the Hadith such that it can be understood for the first time. And I did so at Yahweh's specific request so that you would have the means to understand that your enemy is not Fakistinians. It's not Fatah. It's not the PLO. It's not Hamas. It's not Islamic Jihad. It's not Hezbollah. It's not ISIS. Your enemy is Islam. And I have detailed proof of that. And I'm doing a prolonged series in our Rainbow Room specific to that, but all 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion, which are detailed and documented, comprehensive, are available free, both at YAHOWAH.com and at goddamnreligion.org. No one has ever done this systematic demonstration that Islam is a declaration of war, a terrorist manifesto, as I have done in disproving the Quran and the Hadith and demonstrating how specifically this religion has been at war with Israel since 622, 14 centuries ago. But my willingness to condemn Israel's foes didn't stop there. Not only am I the only person to have proven conclusively that Islam is a death cult and that it exists such that everyone on earth is either enslaved to its demonic wannabe god or dead. I've also done the same thing with the Christian New Testament in Twistianity. I have proven emphatically 1,000 times over that it is a complete fraud and that the character of Jesus Christ never existed. He's nothing but a crude counterfeit based on identity theft of the actual Messiah and the Son of God, Dod. And I did this not only because Christianity has been so lethal to Jews over 17 centuries, but I also did it to clear away that religious muck so that for the first time you might appreciate the truth regarding the actual Messiah, Son of God and Savior, and that you should know that he is your returning King. So it's true that no one has ever done these two things. I've also done something that no one else has done, which is that I've taken the book that is near and dearest to the rabbis the book of Ezekiel and disproven it, shown it to be Satan's autobiography, impugning rabbinic Judaism with it, as I have done throughout all of the volumes I have written. So no one in all of human history has used the scriptures of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam to prove that they are false, while at the same time translating the oldest extant sources of the Torah, Nabi, prophets, and Mizmor, Psalms, from the Dead Sea Scrolls, scrubbing them of their diacritical markings so that the 11th century rabbinic influence would be expunged, and presenting an amplified translation that is easily verified, that is complete and accurate, so that you might know what your God actually had to say. I have more credentials than this. I'm the first person to reveal that there are 5 terms and conditions of the covenant and 5 benefits. And I have not only laid them out and documented them in video blogs and in my books, I've also explained how the 5 benefits of the covenant are fulfilled through the Moed Mikre, specifically based upon what Dod did at Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. I'm the first to correctly not only pronounce Yahweh's name, but to prove that the pronunciation of his name as Yahweh is accurate and reintroduce you to your God. I'm the first not only to explain the intent of each of the 7 Moed Mikre, writing 3 volumes about them, but also to date the dress rehearsals for each, the fulfillment of each, to explain their specific intent, to reveal who has and will fulfill them, and the dates going forward that the final 4 will be enabled. There are these and 1,000 other insights that are completely unheralded and were unknown to anyone prior to my collaboration with Yahowah. And of course, the ultimate discovery of all time, the realization that Dod is our Savior. He served in the second of his 3 lives as the Passover lamb and wrote vociferously about his ordeal in first person, and also vociferously about why he volunteered to take on this role and why God allowed it, and also fulfilled Matzah and Bikurim, the first person to ever understand the mechanism of Matzah, and to explain to you that what Dod did is that he took the guilt of every covenant member and he bore it on his nefesh soul. After fulfilling Pesach and sacrificing his Bashar body as the lamb, he carried that guilt with him into Sheol, the place of separation, where he deposited there never to be seen again, making us perfect before our God. And then on Bikurim, the Bakor, the firstborn son of God, something that the rabbis denounce that it's not even possible, but God is insistent. Noah is his son, he is his father, he is the firstborn of God. He told us so emphatically. The firstborn enabled Bikurim, firstborn children, so that you could be part of God's eternal family and celebrate all time together with him. To literally be a brother or sister of our King, Dod. So there's a lot that I am bringing to you, Israel, that has never been brought to you before. No one has ever written 30 plus books of their own translations of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, and then provided a commentary on them, much less thousands of profound insights that are all unheralded. And so this is the story that God wants you to know. And you might say, well, why a goy? After all that Yahweh says, don't engage in the ways of the goy. Why a goy? Well, first of all, why a person? Let's start there. Why a person? Because during the Exodus, the children of Israel told Yahweh to shut up and go away and never speak to them again. And God says, all right, got no problem with that. You are irritable and irascible, stubborn, opinionated, disagreeable, embittered. I'm good with that. I'll find people to speak through. And of course, the first was Moshe. And all the revelation for the next 1,000 years was never again directly from God. And it's exactly 1,000 years from 1447, 1448 BCE, and speaking to Moshe during the Exodus, and the final revelation through the final prophet, Malachi, my messenger, whose text we're going to engage in here in just a moment after this summary introduction. And he spoke in 447, 448 BCE, 1,000 years, that God communicated to you indirectly through his prophets because you told him to shut up and go away, that you never wanted to hear from him or see him again. Well, God made a promise that he would return and restore his covenant relationship with his people, and he's going to honor that, even though his people have chosen to erase his name and to be religious as opposed to engage in the covenant. And that's a non-starter. You need to know that God hates religion. And he is exceedingly blunt about it. Goddamn religion. And while he hates all religion, he hates Judaism the most because it's done the most direct harm to its people. In fact, if it were not for Judaism, there'd be no Christianity and no Islam, something else that I have uniquely proven. And so it is not only something that God, in terms of communication, has chosen to communicate through men and women, and mostly men, over this 1,000-year period. There was never again a direct communication from God. Always through individuals, men like myself. Now, so why not another Yehud? Moshe was a Yisraelite, wasn't a Yehud, but he was a Yisraelite. And you go on through the prophets, and they were all Yisraelites. But you know, God didn't start his story with Yisraelites. He started his story with Adam and Towrah. They were not Yisraelites. He continued his story with Noah and his family. They were not Yisraelites. He then took his story with man and established his covenant family with with Abraham and Sarah, even with Yishak, the first child of the covenant. And guess what? They were Babylonians. They were not Israelites. Even Jacob, he wasn't a Israelite. His sons were. And so God started his story with non-Israelites, and he's ending his story with a non-Israelite. Now, if you want to know why he did that, the answer is really quite simple. And we read it, and I shared it with you in the last program on the man from Edom. because it's Yahweh's responsibility for telling his people why it would be a nakar, an observant foreigner, that would speak to them. And through Yashayah, he said that he looked, he searched the chasms of time. And in all of that time, he found no Jew, not a single Yehudim, that was willing to listen to him and respond. You know, the Jews that pretended that they were interested in God and speaking for God were the least qualified because they were the rabbis. And they were doing exactly the thing that God wanted to be exposed and condemned. So he couldn't speak through them. And a huge percentage of the people were beguiled by the rabbis. So God couldn't speak through them. And the rest of his people just were not interested in him. Couldn't speak through them. As a matter of fact, God can't speak through anyone that doesn't first walk away from religion and politics. I was once religious, as was Moshe. I was once political, as was Moshe. But I walked away from both before Yahweh reached out to me, as did Moshe. And so that is why God chose a goy. Now, as for your whoa, don't. Didn't God say don't engage in the way of the Gentiles? Yes, but you see, this goy doesn't engage in the way of the goy. He engages in the way of the Yehudim. I have renounced the way of the goy. I've renounced Christianity and Islam, as well as politics, both of the conspiratorial type and of the progressive type, which is also conspiratorial. So I'm not bringing you the way of the goy. In fact, I am, as the man from Edom, I'm the person who came away from that, who came out of it, who knows it because he was once part of it. Just like was the case with Moshe. Moshe knew what was wrong with the politics, the religion, the caste economics, and the militarism of Mitzrayim, which made him a more effective spokesperson for Yahweh. It's just as the prophet Hosea that we have been considering in our other series was asked to marry a religious whore so that he would have some empathy for what God was enduring with the Israelites. So now you know. And you can then only have one other argument, since God said, I'm going to speak through a person, not directly to you, because that's what you demanded. And that there were no Yehudim, no Israelites for God to engage. And he's very emphatic, says so in the great Isaiah scroll. You can go read it. Not making this up. That's exactly what it says. God looked, he found no one. And ultimately it comes down to this. There are hundreds and hundreds of very exacting prophecies that describe what Yahweh has chosen to do through me. And there's no one else in all of human history, right up to this moment, who meets those criteria. And that leaves you with only one issue. You can say, well, we don't agree. We don't like God's choice. We want it to be one of our own. Too damn bad. Get your head out of you know where. You weren't chosen for this job because you weren't listening, because you were unwilling to go where his words lead. I was chosen by default because I was the one person God found who was willing to listen. Now, I have not disappointed him. I have been diligent in doing this job to the best of my ability, but clearly he is, well, would say stacking the deck such that the cards are going to play out exactly as he has intended. That's why he has imbued me with his 7 spirits. And that is why he asked me to transition from full-time translator and writer to now video blogger, so I could bring this message to you in the way that you are most comfortable hearing it, as a person speaking to you. And I'm speaking to you in English. And I'm speaking to you in English for a number of reasons. One is that the modern version of Hebrew has many adaptations that are hostile to God's message. Someone asked me today, they said that the YAHOWAH doesn't exist in Hebrew. It's now a Vav. Well, in the language of Revelation, from 1447 BCE to 447 BCE, when Yahweh was communicating through his prophets, there was no Vav, but there was a YAHOWAH. And the YAHOWAH is essential because it tells you how to pronounce Shalom, Torah, and Yahweh. And since the modern version of Hebrew has been corrupted in many ways, I'm not part of that. I can stand apart from that and look at the original language as it was written and understand what the alphabet conveyed. But also, Hebrew is not the language most common to the Jewish ethnicity. It's English. I mean, everybody except the Haredim, who I have no interest in, God has no interest in, but everyone but the Haredim in Israel is required to learn English. It's part of the core curriculum in school. And almost as many Jews live in the United States as live in Israel. In fact, I think it kind of goes back and forth, and maybe actually slightly more today that live in the United States than Israel, where they speak English. But the overwhelming preponderance of Jews in the United States do not speak Hebrew, and the overwhelming preponderance of Jews in Israel speak English. So it is the language that I was asked to convey this, but even the prophecies, it specifically says that I would speak to you in a tongue that is not Hebrew. So I'm honoring that request, and I have to speak to Jews everywhere. Now, if your issue is that you don't like God's pick, hasn't that been the problem of Jews the past 3,000 years? You haven't liked God's choices. You prefer your religious choices to his relational choices. You prefer Hashem to Yahweh. You prefer a fake rabbi conveying the Talmud, or rabbis conveying the Talmud over Yahweh's Torah, prophets, and Psalms. You prefer a fake Messiah, Bar Kokhba, even his star, over Yahweh's choice of messiahs, though David and his menorah over my shoulder there. So you and God have been at odds with each other over God's picks. And, when Yahweh picked Moshe, a broken down 80-year-old shepherd out in the hinterlands of Arabia, to liberate his people, that should have given you a clue, particularly when he says that his diction wasn't very good. Yahweh picked a man with poor diction to introduce the proper pronunciation of his name. That's something, isn't it? And so God's means of choosing people is just different. He didn't choose a political leader. He didn't choose a social influencer. He didn't choose a military leader. He didn't choose somebody who was religious. He chose somebody who walked away from religion. And then think of Dowd. After choosing an 80-year-old man, he chose one who was 8, showing his adaptivity, his ability to work with young and old, and in my case, in between. That Yahweh, when he chose Dowd as an 8-year-old lad and said, "You're going to anoint him," and he would anoint him 3 times. He would call him my son 3 times because he would live 3 lives. Yahweh says, my criterion for choosing people with whom I'm going to work is very different than yours. Now, I have made it my mission to understand what it was about Dowd, what it was about Moshe that caused God to choose them versus all others. And because I did it for a number of reasons, I was asked to do this for you. Seemed reasonable to me that if I'm asked to do this mission for you, which I have come to know its importance, and I'll share that with you in a moment, that God probably made that choice based upon some similar criterion, that I must have some of the same attributes and experiences and attitudes of those God chose before me. And so I have studied the character and the responses of Moshe and of Dowd to see where they failed and where they excelled. And where they excelled, I have tried to develop those attributes such that they could be brought fully to bear in being successful in this mission. And where they failed, I have tried to reinforce myself such that I don't trip up similarly. Now, the bottom line is God made this choice. I know why. I've begun to share why, because I thought it was important, because it doesn't just apply to me. Yes, in this role, God chose someone that had very similar attributes, although he actually had some attributes that were beyond what Moshe and Dowd had, because it was needed at this time. I have chosen to examine them, and you should care about them, because God wants you to serve him as well, and to serve his people, and to make this homecoming as marvelous as it is possible, fulfilling as it can be. And therefore, the more you exemplify Dowd and Moshe and the characteristics that God found attractive in me, the better. He wants you to be bold and outspoken, sarcastic even. He wants you to repudiate religion and politics, especially that of his people, and also especially of that have abused his people. He wants you to be a student of his words. He wants you to make the connections necessary to understand what he has conveyed. And then he wants you to share what you have learned. Before we dive back into the text, the other thing that I want to share with you, because it is essential for you to understand, is what's at stake. Why did God make this choice at this time? He engaged with me 24 years ago. At the time he engaged, by his own declaration, not a single person on earth knew him. No one was willing to state his name. No one spoke of his hatred of religion and his disdain for politics, explained his covenant correctly, or his Moed Mikre accurately. Didn't even translate his testimony with any degree of credibility. And if 24 years ago, after no one had been receptive to Yahweh for 2,400 years, that God reached out and said, I'm going to start working with someone again. Let me take my Wookiee and give him the opportunity to get back down. So if there was no one, then that's God's own testimony. Not a single person knew him. Not a single person understood the purpose of the upcoming harvest of Shabuah or of Towrah or the timing of Yom Kippurim when God's going to return, or the story how we came from the garden and we're returning to Eden. No one knew the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name. There are thousands of things that were not known, most of which need to be known, including the role that Dode played as our Messiah and Son of God in the fulfilling of Pesach Matzah B'Kodim. And so what was the likelihood that after 2,400 and almost 50 years of no one knowing Yahweh and no one understanding any of these upcoming events, that you would go from no one to many in times to have a productive Shabuah harvest, in time to have a pleasing Teruah ingathering, in time to prepare the last witness such that he's ready to serve as the Adamah Parah, prepare Yah's people for the homecoming. What are the likelihood that you would have gone after 2,450 years of no one to many without God's intervention in this way? From God's perspective, and he knows future history because he's seen it, zero. So what would have happened had he not engaged in this way? What are the consequences of us not collaborating in this way? What if I had told God, no, I don't want to do it? There would have been no one at the Shabuah harvest. You wouldn't even know when it is. You wouldn't even know what it is, much less when it's going to occur. And there would have been no one who would have benefited from the Shabuah harvest. And should that occur, it would be a prophetic flop, something God does not do. No one would know the timing of a period called Jacob's troubles. No one was even speaking about it. No one would know what to expect. No one would have been discussing Teruah and what the day of the herald represents. But most importantly, you'd have gone all the way to the near destruction of Israel, because no one had written and proven that Islam is the enemy and that Israel is at war with Islam, and Islam would have devoured Israel as a result, and there would not have even been a remnant of Yisrael come Yom Kippurim, come the fulfillment of Teruah, to perfect for the family reunion. The nation wouldn't survive. And even then, you would have no idea when God was returning. You wouldn't even know his name. You wouldn't know his son's name. You wouldn't know that it was Dode who was returning, when they were returning, why they were returning, what was going to happen then. There would have been no one there. And if there was no one there, they wouldn't have returned. They're not going to return to a planet that no one knows them. because there would be no purpose in going forward. And what God conveys finally through the final prophet in the final chapter in the final line said, if I hadn't done all of this and this collaborative effort through this individual, I would have just simply destroyed the planet, because there would have been no purpose to the human experience. That's what would have happened. That's why there's so many prophecies regarding this. That's why the 7 spirits of Yahweh empower this message to you. This is why I look you directly in the eye and tell you what's coming and my role in fulfilling it. Now, I want to remind you, before we commence with the ongoing testimony, I am not doing this for a following. I have never taken a donation, and I'm not going to start. There is no donate button. Even the books, which are available free in their entirety online, are royalty free in paperback and hardback. I don't want your money. I most certainly don't want your praise. I don't want a following. Good God, I don't want a following. I'd much prefer to be anonymous. I moved to this tiny little island so I could focus on this job and have no distractions. Sold everything but my home. So I'm here to communicate this message to you. I want nothing from you other than for you to listen. I serve Yahweh. I serve his son. And I am committed to doing the best job I can of awakening you in time, of sharing with you what you need to know to be part of that Shabuah harvest, the Teruah ingathering, the beneficiaries of the Adamah Parah, and the joyous remnant of God's people that celebrate the family reunion on Yom Kippurim so that we can all camp out together in the Sukkah celebration of our return to the Gan Eden. Now, I cannot tell a lie in the sense of just because I want nothing from you and would accept nothing from you, and I do this as a labor of love, serving Yahweh. Yahweh doesn't view things that way. He takes care of those who do as he asks. And so there are considerable benefits of doing this job. And one of them would have been something that I would have rejected out of hand prior to getting to know Yahweh well, his people well, and particularly those who have tormented his people well, better than anyone ever. And that is that God has assigned to the choder the rod of divine vengeance. And that those, since it's fresh in our minds, who perpetrated 10/7 and who are rallying on behalf of the Muslims against Jews worldwide, I have been given the responsibility of not only sending them to Sheol, hell, but of those who have deliberately caused consternation for God's people and have harmed them. I'm responsible for making sure that they endure 7 times more than they dished out before they're sent to Sheol. So I can tell you, if you are a rabbinical type, you're a Bible-thumping Christian, you are an angry jihadist Muslim, you are an enraged progressive in league with the Muslims who want to perpetrate genocide on Jews and blame Jews for what is being done to them. You don't want to piss me off. just a word of advice. Don't do it. You can choose to ignore me to your own harm, in the sense of, if you choose to ignore Yahweh, you choose to ignore me, at the end, your soul will simply dissipate into nothing. No penalty, no reward. That's okay. I've got no problem with you making that choice. You can choose to be religious so long as you don't act upon it in a way that is harmful to God's people, and the same thing will happen to you. Your soul will simply dissipate into nothingness. But if you harm God's people, if you deliberately mislead on behalf of a religion or a political preference, people away from God to their detriment, then there is a consequence, and it is Sheol, and it's eternal separation. And for the worst of the offenders, people like Muhammad and Maimonides and Akiba, Paul, Peter, Luke, for example, for the perpetrators of the Holocaust and of the Inquisition, for all of the popes, for all of the imams, and for those who perpetrated 10/7, there is going to be the rod of divine vengeance, and there will be hell to pay. So that's God's story. And now that I've shared it with you, I'm actually going to review where we were in our last program, so that when we do The Man from Edom Part 10 tomorrow, we'll be up to speed. We won't have such a distance between programs. So God wants us to know that he is not happy with his people. And yet, as I communicate on social media to them and I watch the news, Yehudim remain oblivious to Yahweh's disappointment. And this is the very reason that the Choder and Bashar was required. Someone had to have the wherewithal, the persistence, the compassion, the intellect, the nerve, the courage to break the Jewish obsession with religion and politics. Yahudah, the beloved of Yah, now known as Judah and Jews. It's a compound of Yahweh's name, Yahu, for Yahuwah, and Dod, beloved, the Messiah. It means the beloved of Yah. Yahudah, Jews, have been untrustworthy and spiritually unfaithful. A detestable and repulsive religious abomination has been committed in Israel and in Jerusalem. Boy, is that ever true? Indeed, Yahudah has defiled and they have profaned the set-apart place, the Kodesh, the sanctuary that separates and distinguishes, that is special and dedicated to Yahweh. Right now, for example, it has two hideous religious scars on it, the Dome of the Rock and Alaska Mosque. I beg Israel to show the courage to tear them down. And if you don't, I will. That is a place that should not be desecrated. It's the set-apart place of Yahweh, which, to provide the benefits of the relationship, he loves. He does not love the Haredim in it. He does not love the Muslims in it. He does not love the Christians in it. And he does not love the progressives in it. But there is a remnant of his people in Israel, in Yahudah, in Jerusalem, that are going to listen to him, that are going to return to him. They're going to respond favorably. And he loves you. I want you to love him in return. I know Yahweh better than anyone on earth today. And while I'm delighted that I can make that statement because we have a wonderful working relationship, my goal is for there to be thousands and thousands of you who can say the same thing. The set apart place of Yahweh, which to provide the benefits of the relationship he loves. Further, he has married and is owned by the Lord Baal. Speaking of Jews, he's telling you that from his perspective, that you are so corrupt in your religion that you are actually married to and owned by the Lord, who is Baal. He's the very false god that Elia attacked and bested what will soon be 40 Yobel, 888 years ago, in a dress rehearsal for the main event that he will orchestrate as the master of ceremonies with the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah on Towrah 2033. But Israel, at this point, from God's perspective, you are still religious. You are still owned by the Lord Baal. You are the house of an illegitimate God. You won't even say Yahweh's name because you don't know him. This is Malachi, my messenger, Malachi 2:11. And so you have wearied your God. You have worn him out. You have exhausted and troubled your God with all of your many words. Oh, in the Talmud in particular. You got religious books after religious books. I mean, I've got a lot of books behind me that translate and comment on Yahweh's testimony, or translate and comment on the religious texts of the Christian New Testament or Quran, and compare them to God's testimony so I can repudiate them. But that's not the purpose of the religious tomes that Jews have written with their very many words. And there are tome after tome after tome. And all they do is contradict what Yahweh has conveyed to his people. You've just wearied God. You've worn him out with your many words. We read a passage in our program a couple of days ago on Katzir Harvest, where God says, I'm going away. I'm going to have nothing to do with you. I'm just going to leave you to your own devices for a good long time. And that I'm not coming back until you embrace me by name. You know who I am. And you start being observant of what I have shared with you again. And he says that, I'm going to dispatch this messenger that's going to make that difference in your mindset and to get this done. And that Yahweh's not returning until I succeed with you. So let's make it easier rather than harder. And then through the prophet Malachi, this is the last of the prophets, by the way, where God says, you have wearied your God with your many words. But you say, in what way have we exhausted and troubled him? By your saying, all of those who engage in shouting with fellow countrymen, no matter how wrong, benefit as if they are moral and good in the sight of Yahweh, because he is pleased with them. This is the mantra of the rabbis, that they are pleasing to God, that they're righteous before God, and that they are needed to be religious to save Israel when they're nothing but disgusting parasites destroying the country. And God despises them. Or Where is the God of the Mishpat who decides what is right and wrong, vindicating, convicting, and just? Malachi, my messenger, 2:17. That's why they feel that they're justified to write their own mishvat, all of the rules and regulations, because they say, where is the God that would tell us what's right and wrong? He already told you what's right and wrong. That's the purpose of the Torah, but you convoluted it. He told you what's right and wrong through the prophets, but you didn't listen. So you're now saying, so since there is no God of the mishpat, we're going to make the mishpat. Just like saying, that God didn't explain how to eat kosher, so we need to do it. God didn't explain how to do nothing day on the Shabat, so we need to do it. Maybe he didn't tell you what you wanted to hear, but he explained exactly what he wanted from you. And so God said, you write and shout over me because you think don't care, that you're free to do so. But God's very clear that he gave you all of the information you needed to know, and then gave you a person that can awaken you to this truth. And he is not coming back, and he is not talking to you until there's enough of you who are changed, who are willing to embrace him by name, who are willing to accept the conditions of the covenant, who are committed to celebrating the Moed Mikre as they were fulfilled and are intended. Well, this is one of the greatest crimes ever committed. Rabbis not only spewed out millions of words in the conceptions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, of which they're responsible for all three, they attributed their false characterizations to God. In Judaism, they went so far as to call their God-forsaken Talmud a Torah, stealing God's terms. It's no different than Christians stealing the term Messiah and Son of God and Savior from Dode to apply it to their New Testament. Rather than listen to Yahweh, rabbis have shouted over him. The first claim that Yahweh is rebuking here is the false notion that Jews who go along with the rabbis and with Jewish tradition are moral, good, and righteous. And God is lambasting that view, that he is somehow pleased with the religious. He is not. He is anti-religious. They claim it. Yahweh denies it. Who do you suppose is right? Doesn't matter to you. The second religious assessment God is denouncing is that men have earned the right to determine mishpat, what is right and wrong, which is, that is a rabbinic specialty. And just because he is avoiding them doesn't mean that they have replaced him. He's avoiding them because he doesn't like them. He's avoiding them because he wants nothing to do with them. And that means that all they're doing as rabbis and as Haredim today is annoying Yahweh. Therefore, since God cannot communicate through those who speak over him, who do not listen to him, who claim their criterion matter more than his, and who do not know him, well, here we are again. That's why he selected, prepared, and dispatched a Malach messenger of his own at this moment. And here's one of the many hundreds of prophecies pertaining to this mission. Therefore, behold, I am going to send out Hena Ane Shalach, my Malach, my messenger, my representative, masculine singular, who as a herald will interpret and convey my intentions and my thoughts as my envoy declaring what I have to say, just as he had in the past. I'm going to pick someone to speak through. This particular individual, however, is going to be a little different than the others because I am imbuing him with my 7 Ruach, and therefore he is literally going to be a spiritual messenger. That's why he used the term malach, which is a spiritual messenger, but yet is a corporeal man, a bashar. And he will prepare, clearly mark, and highly regard the way unto me, and regarding my appearance and approaching my presence. That's the job. Well, it's half the job. The other half of the job is to denounce religion and politics and conspiracy so that there are people who will be receptive to the truth. And why God spends more time in the Torah and prophets denouncing religion and politics than he does conveying his message of what's right and wrong, beneficial and counterproductive. I do the same. And that's part of the preparation. You can't clearly mark and highly regard the path to Yahweh while it is profaned with religion and politics. You need to clear that away. And the way to Yahweh, by accepting the 5 terms and conditions of the covenant and receiving the benefits of the covenant by attending the Moed Mikre with the proper mindset, so that you know what God is offering through them and what you receive by them. The way is Pesach, Matzah, Bekurim, Shabua, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. That is the way unto Yahweh. It's a 7-step path that leads from our world to him. And it also demarcates the very time that we, as the covenant family and as the final remnant of Israel, have the opportunity to appear in Yahweh's presence. Then suddenly and straightway, to open eyes and minds, he and they, there's a disagreement here between 4Q12, which has him, while the Masoretic reads he. There really is merit for both of these. Well, I am the one that he has spoken of here. And the Masoretic reads he because it's been the malach is masculine singular. And, not always is the older witness on something this small, a pronoun, more accurate than a consensus text. So I can't tell you if it really is he or they. Both work. He would be correct in referencing the malach that Yahweh was sending out. They would be correct in that this messenger is being joined by one of Yahweh's most acclaimed spokesmen, Elia. And so it will be Yada and Elia that will together pursue that final ingathering. They're going to arrive in Jerusalem in 2030. So he is correct, they is correct. So then suddenly and straightaway to open eyes and minds, they will arrive to pursue the harvest for his palatial home, the upright one, to whom you yourselves have sought, along with the malach messenger. Now, this is a place where they makes more sense actually than he, because it is the 2 of them that are arriving in Jerusalem to speak to God's people 3.5 years before Yahweh's return with the upright one, who is Dode, the palatial home is both Dod's and Yahweh's. Dod is the exemplar of the covenant. Yahweh established the covenant through Dod. Both of their homes will be adjacent to one another on the ridgeline of Sion on Mount Moriah. So this is that special set-apart place that Yahweh spoke of just a moment ago. And the one who you yourselves have sought, along with the Malach, well, the ones that the Jews have sought, of course, is Eliah, who is mentioned in this same prophetic book. Now, it's kind of funny, is that the rabbis and in Jewish tradition, they set a place for Eliah at the Passover table, Passover coming over, whether you're going to celebrate on a Friday evening or a Saturday evening. Both are possible based on astronomical versus observational countings of from the new moon, the first of Abib. That Eliah is the prophet most known for repudiating Jewish religious and political perversions. So if you wanted a person that would be the least welcome in a religious setting, that the last time he was surrounded by Jews being religious, he killed them, that would be Eliah. So it's just insane that he is brought into Judaism as someone they're anticipating. But the fact is, the prophet's correct. They're anticipating Eliah, who is going to be the other witness, even though he despises and has already shown his adroitness in exposing and condemning and eliminating the religious and the political within Israel. But he's going to be there, the one you have sought, along with the Malach messenger. And he is the Malach spiritual messenger of the covenant. As I sit here with you, the thing that I have written the most about is the covenant. Again, the first person to understand that there's 5 conditions and 5 benefits, and that the first condition requires a person to walk away from Babel, from the intermixing and commingling of truth and lies, as was found in Babylon, where religion and politics were integrated, just as they are in Israel today, just as they were in Babylon all those many years ago and have been throughout the history of civilization. And it is away from one's country. That's mindset, attitudinally, not geography. Away from religion and politics, conspiracy, human customs, the family of man, this co-mixing of truth and lies that make religion possible, that God is asking us to disassociate with. That's the first condition of the covenant, to walk to God and become perfect. Well, that is achieved through matzah, where Dod removed our guilt and deposited in Sheol, never to be seen again. To trust and rely upon Yahweh, which can be done once you are not reliant on your political party, your religious leader, your military in any sense. Once you are willing to eschew those things and rely upon Yahweh and Yahweh alone, then you have met the third condition of the covenant. The fourth is to do as I am doing with you now, which is to closely examine and carefully consider each of the terms and instructive conditions that comprise this family relationship, so that you're in a position to respond intelligently. And then as a man, you must be circumcised, and as parents, we're asked to circumcise our sons on the 8th day, because it is the sign of the covenant. Those are the 5 conditions. Now, there are 5 hands in Yahweh's name. Yod He Wah. Check it out. There's 5 hands, and the original alphabet of the Torah. There are 5 conditions of the covenant. There are 5 benefits of the covenant. The 5 benefits are that on Pesach, the doorway to life is opened. You become immortal. On Matzah, our guilt is removed and taken to Sheol, so we appear perfect before God. On Bokurim, we are adopted into Yahweh's covenant family, and we are enriched and empowered by him tenfold. Those are the benefits of the covenant. They are all provided through the first three Moed Mikre, which Dode fulfilled in year 3000 Yah, exactly when and how he said he would do so, stating when 700 years in advance, explaining how 1,000 years in advance. And so God dispatched and prepared the spiritual messenger of the covenant. Masculine singular. It is the job that I am fulfilling for you now as part of the YAHOWAH blog, in whom and for which you have desired covenant, being part of God's family. So pay attention. He is arriving and he will be returning to pursue the harvest, promises Yahweh of the spiritual implements. Malachi 3:1. Yes, indeed. He has arrived and he will return. And you might say, wait a minute, he has arrived and he has returned. What do you pursue the harvest? What are you talking about? Well, first of all, it's what Yahweh was talking about. I'm here now, but I won't be here come Shabuah, 7 years prior to Yahweh's return at the commencement of the time of Yaakov's troubles, May 22nd of 2026, of course, a Shabbat when God does his best work. I'll be leaving with the rest of the covenant family. I hope you can join us. But I'm going to return from Yahweh's presentation. There's 8 individuals that will return along with me. And our purpose will be to continue this mission, to educate as many of you as possible, particularly Yehudim, to Yahweh's impending return, so that there's a marvelous homecoming. And I will actually appear with Elia in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount in 2030, 3.5 years before Yah's return. So this is the story that God is conveying to us. Yahweh expressly agreed that he would go away and not speak directly to his wayward and rebellious children, especially under their prior and now present circumstances, realizing that there hasn't been a single Yisraelite in the intervening period willing to listen to him, respond to him, even say his name. And we're approaching a rather important juncture. So Yahweh was left with a singular rational option, and that is that he would shalach malach, dispatch a messenger. Now, of course, it wouldn't be easy. Of course, it never is. The malach messenger would have to be located, done, selected, done, and approached, done. That all occurred in 2001, 24 years ago. He would have to agree to engage. Yeah, it was pretty convincing, however. And he'd have to be willing to devote the time. I've done the analysis. It's 1,222 minimum 80-hour weeks. I'm currently working a 90-hour week. 1,222 80-hour weeks and counting. He would then require being equipped and prepared, which is the purpose of the infusion of the 7 spirits of Yahweh, accompanied, well, they would make that it possible for us to write the translations and commentary and provide the insights in these 36 books that sit behind me. Of course, then there was the matter of gaining Yisrael's attention, which is no easy chore since they've refused to listen to God. But I can tell you, and my wife can attest, that I give it all, my all, trying to communicate to you in the most difficult of all environments, X, but it is at least interactive and more quietly, more comfortably, more cerebrally, more in a family mode on Facebook, which has become really congenial and cooperative. And then, while it isn't nearly as interactive, we have the library of well over 200 hours of the YAHOWAH blog on Facebook. So the goal at this time is to panaderek la pene, to prepare and clearly demarcate the way to approach Yahweh prior to his appearance. And in this manner, the malach would cause those who are receptive and open-minded to pursue this upcoming harvest, Shabuah. And in this regard, the reason he, they, as I've shared with you, was written was to reflect both options, because the manuscripts show both, and we're going to find that he, singular, masculine, as in the malach of the covenant, has appeared and will return. And when he returns, he will return with they, Yada and Elia, together, working collaboratively in advance of Yahweh's return with Dod. Therefore, suddenly and straightaway, the blind will see. It's the miracle of Yashayah's treatise on chodering. Elia and Yada will return to pursue the harvest, where the celestial voyagers will arrive at the Hekel, the royal residence and palatial home of Yahweh and Dod. This is the destination of future intellectual time travelers. And while it speaks, yes, my wife is very intellectual, and she's going to be among those who make this journey. Those of you who join us will have the opportunity to meet a very special woman of Yahweh. And while it speaks of Shamaim and this royal residence, as well as Dod's home, Beeth, here on earth that will be restored, it is also the home of the Bereth, the family covenant. Based upon what we are told at the beginning of Zechariah and here towards the conclusion of Malachi, we know that Yahweh will be dispatching his favorite anti-religious orator, the very erudite and sarcastic Elia. And since he was the last Israelite to stand up against the religious and political establishment and take them down, he has earned the distinction of being the Edom, the upright one. As further evidence of this, Elia is the one individual who Israelites have sought, not recognizing, of course, that he is overtly opposed to the religions that they are clamoring. And so the ones that are asking him to come and sit at the table are the very ones that he is going to do with, as he did to the prophets of Baal, whom Yahweh said, "My people are still married to Baal," 2,888 years ago. And all the while, the two will be telling you to anticipate the arrival of Yahweh and Dod. And with the upright one identified as Elia and the Malach, of course, the upright one is ultimately Dod, who will be returning, and we're here to announce his return. The Malach Bereth, messenger of the covenant, must be Yada. And since I'm the first to identify and report the Bereth's conditions and its benefits, and the first to reveal that the rewards derived from Dod's fulfillment of Chak Matzah, to enable the delivery of these benefits, I suppose the title is fitting. And in this case, while there is still no sign that Israelites have collectively come to their senses, well, in time, this will change. The covenant, the Malak is reconstituting, is highly desirable. And that is why he's shown arriving to arouse interest in Yahweh and to pursue these harvests. This is the message. This brings us up to new territory. We're in our 10th iteration of the man from Edom with so many other titles. We will pursue this program into some very interesting material. I have taken 2 days off from producing a YAHOWAH blog until this evening because I am pursuing a comprehensive retranslation and analysis of Dode's 14th Mashal proverb word picture, because the first presentation of the Torah is not actually in Yeshayah 11. 300 years before Yeshayah would devote his 11th chapter to this individual as the Torah, Dode devoted an entire Mashal proverb to him. And I'm going to share that with you as we move forward through all of this, so that you would have a better understanding of this unique individual and what he has to endure, what he will experience, what he will overcome, how he will ultimately prevail, and so that you're part of the covenant family who is able to participate in the Shabuah harvest. And that is a highly desirable situation, because if you make this decision sooner rather than later, then not only are you guaranteed the greatest journey of a lifetime, you're in a position to enrich God's family. You're in a situation where you will have some time left to increase the quality and quantity of those who accept the terms and conditions of the covenant, making eternity richer for all of us, earning appreciation from God himself. So this is why we want you to be part of this now. Yes, we'd love for you to be part of it later, but now is better than later. There's every advantage, and there are no disadvantages of becoming part of God's forever family. Well, I thank you for listening. I appreciate you allowing me to go back through a comprehensive summation, if you will. I guess summation and comprehensive are oxymorons, but nonetheless, it seemed that way. As I tried to readdress why me, why you, and where we go from here. I thank you for listening. I am Yada, Craig Winn, and this has been a special edition of the YAHOWAH blog.